right, welcome back to the Prime Focus Goalkeeping Channel and the Last Line Soccer Podcast. My name is Brandon Miller. I'm your host, and I am excited today. We have a very interesting guest, very interesting guest that I've been wanting to talk to for a while. I've seen a lot of your content, seen a lot of the goalkeeping stuff that you've put out, and I've been really impressed and just wanted to get to know you a little bit. So I figured to bring you on the show. So welcome. We've got Quinn Stammer, excuse me. And he is Quinn S1GK on social media. If you've probably seen a lot of his content, a lot of stuff he's been putting out. It's been great. So welcome to the show.
Hey, I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much for having me.
So I've seen a ton of what you've been putting out over the past few months. How long have you been putting out content around goalkeeping?
I started in 2020, right as COVID hit, but I got serious about it about Halloween 2022. That's when I really dove into it.
Okay, nice. So before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit more about your playing career. You're a goalkeeper. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I started playing, as a goalie late. Honestly, I started playing soccer late. Growing up in Canada, I was obsessed with hockey. Wanted to play hockey. It's extremely competitive in Canada to be a high level hockey player. Honestly, I think I wanted to be a high level athlete in anything that I was doing. So I was on almost every sports team in my school and, swimming, hockey, basketball, even badminton, anything that I could get my hands on, I was playing. So I started playing soccer late. I joined my first house league, soccer league when I was 12. And then the World Cup rolled around, 2014 World Cup, and I was 13 and I got asked to join a rep team, like lowest level of rep. But we got asked to join the rep team. Then from there, I just fell in love with it and started playing really seriously and managed to make it into the provincial league at 15. I was just 14 turning 15. It was a pretty big jump pretty quickly, but I had some great coaches helping me along the way. When I turned 17, I moved to a different club and I realized that I wanted to go play soccer in university. Everyone's thinking about Europe, but Europe wasn't an option for me at the time. It wasn't quite there yet. So I decided to try and get scouted to go play in the States, and I was lucky enough to get a Division 1 scholarship to Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa. At Drake, I ended up redshirting my first year, but I was a number two throughout the whole season. I'm born late in October. I'm born October 2001, and so I was 17 years old throughout the majority of the season. So that was still a pretty massive jump for me, going from, playing with 16, 17, 18 year olds to having my two center backs being these English guys and 23 years old finishing up their degree. And it was an interesting process. The plan was for me to I was brought in by a senior goalkeeper, and the plan was for me to play the next few years at school, but he actually got hurt in preseason at Drake. And he thought he was going to be able to come back for the season, but he wasn't able to. And so I had a chat with my coaches, and we mutually decided that it was a good decision for me to transfer to get adequate playing time because this guy was the senior was coming back. He was captain of the team. He was going to play the season. So at that point, COVID had just gotten really bad, and so I came back home. Was talking with a few different schools, ended up settling on Manhattan College in New York City, which is also a Division 1 school. I went there and I played for a year, and then because of financial things, I was on a decent scholarship, and it was supposed to get a little bit better, but sometimes coaches will say things and you don't quite get what you're looking for. And so I said, no
Yeah.
hard feelings. I'm going to head back home to Canada. And then I finished off the rest of my undergrad in Canada at Western University. Now I'll be starting a master's at the University of Toronto, and I'll be playing there as well.
Nice. That is a long journey there.
Yeah.
In terms of, I think there's a lot that I want to cover there because I think like the path from high school soccer, specifically for a goalkeeper, to college soccer, can tend to be a rocky one. I remember when I was going into college, this was back in like 2008, but like I wasn't a big name on the national level, but I was the main guy on my club team. We had two goalkeepers. I played all the important games. I was, playing academy. I was playing against some really good teams and some really good tournaments. I was the guy, and then I got to college and I realized I wasn't the guy. And that can be something like it's really hard to transition. I know you said you were a little bit younger, and so it was kind of a different transition period for you. But like, kind of talk about what it was like, going into college, transitioning into college, what the level of play was like, and how you adapted to that.
Well, man, that's actually a really interesting one because the team I played for in Toronto initially started at North Toronto Nitros, which is quite a good team, very very developmentally based. Really focusing on player development, and then I moved to Vaughan, and the head coach of Vaughan of our team, he's developed guys like Dane St. Clair, who's the current Minnesota United starting goalie, Kamal Miller, Alistair Johnston, who's now playing at Celtic, and a lot of really really great players, and so. But even being in that environment, it was such a jump from the developmental environment, continuing to push and being cohesive as a team to going to Drake because Drake University, the way the program was ran, really well, really well run program, but it was completely fitness based. And as a goalie, I mean, I was decently fit, but I wasn't fit in the sense of what they wanted me to do. We're doing sprints. If you lose anything like multiple, we would have standards trainings as freshmen as well, and that would be if you have 30 balls that guys are using in training, and if one of them isn't quite there, then I remember the senior goalie took the ball, squeezed it. He's like, "No, it's not it." He drop kicked it into the stands, like 4 or 5 levels up, and we had to go get it. And then the next day we had to wake up at 5 a.m. and do 40 minutes of sprints, and it was tough. Like the goalie training too was so different than what I was used to. It was a whole lot of diving, way more diving than I was used to. Really fitness based, and honestly, for me, it wasn't so much the level of play that was different. It was the fitness that was different, and I wasn't ready for that. 17 years old, I was not ready for that kind of fitness.
So what went into that decision to go to Drake? Because I think about like my decision to go UNCW. My main like decision was based on one, the schools in Wilmington, North Carolina, like, by the beach, beautiful city. But the head coach was a former MLS goalkeeper, so I knew that he knew what it took to get me to the professional level, and I felt like he could develop me into what I needed to be in order to reach that level. So what went into that decision for you to go to Drake?
So for most people, it's exactly what you've described is you're sort of picking and choosing, okay, this is going to be the nicest city to live. This is going to be a nice coach to have. This is going to be a nice program to be a part of. For me, it was like, who can give me the most scholarship money? Um, my family is not super rich, not super poor either, like right in the middle, but going to the States, being having a Canadian conversion rate too, it's who can give you the most scholarship money, who's gonna be able, Des Moines, Iowa is a decent place. It's a little bit actually a lot less multicultural than what I'm used to. I'm coming from a big city in Toronto. That was a bit of a culture shock for sure. But it was I knew some of the guys on the team and they're really nice guys, and so I just thought, okay, they're giving me a decent amount of money. Coach seems like he knows what he's talking about. The guys seem like they're really enjoying it there, so I'm going to give it a shot. I actually didn't even tour the place before I went. I just saw it, got the offer, and then figured it was the best one and committed.
So what was that transfer process like? I know you said that you and the coaches talked and you made a mutual decision, but was that a tough decision to make? This is for me, I thought about transferring when I was at school. I played like 5 games every year for my first 3 years. So which isn't a ton. I mean, it's decent playing time, but it's not what I wanted and it's not what I was expecting as I'm looking to develop into a professional goalkeeper. I was sat behind a goalkeeper who was a year ahead of me, a very good goalkeeper, but I just felt like I needed to be playing more. So I thought about transferring, but I just couldn't pull the trigger. And so, what kind of went into your process of transferring?
The biggest thing, yeah, it was a really difficult decision for sure. It was I'd made a lot of friends on the team, and I really enjoyed being at the university. But the biggest thing for me was one, I didn't like the goalkeeper training that was going on. It was way too much fitness based for me. I'm very much I want to deal with one ball at a time, and there's always different ways to train. For me, I really like the English style of goalie training rather than say a Spanish style of goalie training. Um, so that was a big part of it, really fitness based, and I didn't like that. I didn't feel like I was getting a whole lot better in that sense. And the other thing was I didn't really like living in Des Moines. It's just it wasn't my cup of tea. That's the simplest way to put it. So I figured, okay, if I'm not going to be
Mhm.
playing too much next year, and I have an opportunity to move on and also be closer to home. Des Moines, Iowa is 12 hours away from Toronto, and it's if you're going to take a plane, which you had to all the time, you got to interchange as well. I figured I'm going to try and go home and get closer to home, and New York City ended up being that.
Yeah. I mean, Toronto's a beautiful city. I would love to live up that way. Um, but I, what you're talking about training environment, I think that's the biggest thing for goalkeepers is understanding. Like you have to get a pretty good understanding of what the training environment is going to be like. And it's tough to really know until you actually get into it. But a lot of times I feel like that's why goalkeepers aren't successful in certain places. Some of it's mindset and some of it there's external factors, but a lot of it is like the actual environment that you're being put in. And sometimes there's goalkeeper coaches who have more of a South American flair or an English flair or different styles that don't quite fit what you look for. I've had that plenty of times in my career where I've gone to a place, I didn't do enough research, I didn't understand, didn't know the goalkeeper coach, whether maybe they didn't have a goalkeeper coach yet signed, or I didn't get to talk to the goalkeeper coach. But then when I get there, I realize like they don't have the same style. They don't have the same goalkeeping philosophy. So it's kind of us like going back and forth every single week about, what do I need to work on or how do I get better? And I think you got to find a balance. Like that's what I learned. This happened to me back in 2016 is you have to learn, what bits and pieces can you take from that goalkeeper coach that will benefit you, but also understanding like who you are as a goalkeeper and what makes you better because nobody knows you better than you, right? So once you get to a certain level, whether it's, 18, 19 years old, it's probably not that young, but when I'm 25, 26, 27, like I know what helps me get better as a goalkeeper. I know what type of training, what type of environment, I know what's going to help me develop. And I think that's what goalkeepers have to kind of work towards as they're getting older, as you're, getting into college and you start to work with maybe one or two different goalkeeper coaches, you're starting to see what feels good, what it helps you develop as a goalkeeper, and then you start to build your own profile as a goalkeeper. And then from there it's like little tweaks every now and then, as opposed to like sometimes it can be really tough to go into an environment with a goalkeeper coach where they just have a totally different philosophy. And so I think that's the biggest thing when I talk to goalkeepers now, young goalkeepers that I'm working with, is like I'm not going to have every single answer for you that's going to work exactly for you, but I'll give you the framework and you can start to see what's working for you. And maybe you do things a little bit differently, but for the most part it's me helping you figure out who you are as a goalkeeper. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And in that sense, for me, growing up using the more English, maybe you could even say a little bit of German style, but English style of goalkeeper coaching, it's something that I really actually enjoyed from the South American style of goalkeeper coaching is the fact that you have to be watching the ball the whole time, and any time of any type of coaching you have to as well, but you have to be watching the ball so much because you're doing so many movements before you make a save, and so it just enables you to find the ball so much better. I could be completely off balance, and that training, that South American style of training, got me to be able to find that ball and make a save regardless of what my body is doing, and I really really enjoyed that aspect of it. I didn't enjoy the aspect that I wasn't getting set all the time because I find in the game I'll get set and I might hold for 5 seconds, but tiny little adjustments. And I really like training that sort of thing. But in terms of being able to find the ball and make a save, maybe you're moving across the goal or something like that, phenomenal, phenomenal.
Yeah, I think that's one thing throughout my career, and as I coach a lot right now is trying to find that balance of I think it's really important to get set. I think getting set and being able to react is a vital part of goalkeeping, but there are some times where you just have to figure it out in the moment. You have to react, you have to throw yourself at something. And so it's like finding that balance in training of forcing goalkeepers to get set and really building that habit versus sometimes it's just you know teaching them to just be innovative with the save. So it's about finding that balance. But I think that kind of leads into what I want to talk about a little bit more about some of the content that you put out. Like you obviously very active on Instagram and TikTok. What's kind of the goal with a lot of the content that you put out?
I guess my biggest goal is to be able to give back my knowledge to goalkeepers who haven't had the opportunity to train the way that I have. Um, Now, that wasn't the goal all the time. I actually started the account because when COVID hit, I wanted to show my coaches at Drake that I was still training every day. I was a freshman coming out when COVID had come through, and I wanted to show them that I'm still clipping out stuff. I was working with a goalie who's currently playing at the University of Pennsylvania. He was just drafted by CF Montreal this past year in the MLS Super Draft. Um, but he's a good friend of mine, and I've been training with him for a while. And so I wanted to show my coach that I was continuing to train, getting full sessions in, getting better throughout, a terrible pandemic. And so that's what it started as. And then as I saw a few videos start to do a little bit better, then I thought, oh wow, this is pretty sweet. So then I sort of morphed into, okay, how much knowledge can I give back to the community? How many people can I impact and then help them make their lives better? Because it's never me doing it for them. It's them doing it for them. They're just using my whatever I'm putting out as a tool for their success. So, really that's the goal right now, especially in Canada. I don't get paid for any video that I post. Everything is, there's no creator fund in Canada, not on TikTok, not on Instagram, nothing. And so it's a passion project for me. I just want to help as many people as I can.
I love that, and I think that like there's I people can tend to say that I'm a little aggressive on TikTok sometimes with goalkeeper content creators because I think for me it's like a lot of these creators have massive platforms. I don't have a huge platform, but I have a decent amount of followers. You have a good amount of followers. There's content creators that have six figures and millions of followers, and like these are goalkeepers that are getting on here to learn and to see obviously see cool things, but they're looking for knowledge. They want to learn and get better because they want to get to that point, right? And I think that I want to be able to use my channel to share the knowledge that I had a 10-year career. I didn't play at the highest level, but I played at a decent level. I won some games, I won some championships. Like I've done some things, and I want to be able to help goalkeepers either reach that level, reach a higher level, build a mentality that can sustain them through a career. And I think the way that life has shifted from in-person stuff to a lot of the social media stuff, like that's where a lot of the learning takes place. And I think it's great, like content creators like you put out a lot of stuff, like the stuff you put out about like the basics of handling and distribution and showing goalkeepers how to do what they can do for warm-ups and things like that. I think those are so beneficial because those are the constant questions that I get from my goalkeepers, or from coaches that I talk to who are like, what can I do for my goalkeepers when they don't have another goalkeeper to warm them up, and I'm the one warming them up. This is a position that not a lot of people have a ton of knowledge on, and I feel like the people who do have the knowledge can't really gatekeep because there's so many goalkeepers out there that need help, and I can't physically work with all of them because I'm in Charlotte. That just limits me, but I want to figure out ways to help as many goalkeepers as possible.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And that aspect of gatekeeping too. I've ever since I was young, everyone sees someone with a blue check mark, or you see a professional goalie, and they're posting photos of them playing in games, and these gorgeous photos, professional stuff. And I always thought, okay, am I going to be that person who, if I ever get to that level, am I just going to post these photos, or am I going to really give back and show what I can be doing? Give back to the community. And for a long time, I was battling in my head, like, do I just keep a low profile and just post the highlights, or do I post how to do things as well? And I ended up choosing the latter because I felt that was a way better way to help the community.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. So let's see. You said you've trained with a number of high level guys. Obviously, Dane St. Clair. At Minnesota United. Your friend is drafted with Montreal. Like, what are those training sessions like? Like, how do you? I This past offseason, I worked with a number of MLS, USL, NWSL goalkeepers, and it's interesting to see the different styles that each goalkeeper has, but they've all reached a really high level. What does that look like with you? Maybe what different style of play do you have with those other goalkeepers, but are still able to in training compete and play with them pretty well?
I think the best thing I can talk about is when I trained with Dane St. Clair. And so I trained with him. I'm part of Forward Goalkeeping, which is a goalkeeping collective based out of Toronto. And we continue. We're an academy. We help coach other goalkeepers, and a whole bunch of players in the off season come to us and want to get coaching in. And Dane is one of them. So I got the opportunity to train with him twice over the off season. In between, I think he had just come back from the World Cup, and so we were training. And honestly, physically, I didn't feel far off from him, but it's cognitively where he was miles ahead. For me, I felt stressed in the session. Those feelings of nervousness, those feelings of you have to perform, you have to do everything well. You feel like you're under a microscope. You feel like your body's just sort of going through the motions because you're stressed in the session. I was still performing. I was making good saves. I was making good decisions. Distribution was good. His distribution was good. Everything that he was doing was good too, but he was calm. It was almost like it was a walk in the park for him. Service was good, everything was good, training was good, but it was a walk in the park. His mind was free. I was stressed. That was the biggest difference, is that he can compete on that World Cup stage. He can compete and start week in, week out for Minnesota United in the MLS, playing against some great players because of his mentality. That guy's a winner. He wants to win everything, and he was calm during the session. Sure, he's the biggest guy there in terms of his accolades, but he was calm during the session, and I was stressed. That's the biggest difference between an amateur like myself and a professional like him.
I think that that mentality piece is probably the biggest one for me. I've trained with some pretty big names, MLS national team goalkeepers, and I think that's the biggest thing that I notice. My mentality versus their mentality, going into a training session and how they prepare for the training session, and within the training session, you talking about them being calm. It's like they were making mistakes, but it wasn't like that was really affecting them and how they perform. Like they would make a mistake and it's on to the next one, and the next 10 are clean. And like I think that's there's little bits and pieces. Like there's the levels between, say, a college goalkeeper and a USL goalkeeper, an MLS goalkeeper, an MLS goalkeeper, and a national team goalkeeper, right? There can be some large gaps, but for the most part, it's not a lot of huge physical differences, in terms of making saves, in terms of distribution. It's a lot of the mental aspect of it, the decision making process. And how do you do it on a consistent basis? And it's that consistency piece, the mental aspect and the consistency piece are the biggest differences that I noticed. Were like myself when I was training with higher level goalkeepers, and just when I work with other goalkeepers, when I work with and train MLS goalkeepers, USL goalkeepers, noticing those little differences that can take you from being a good USL goalkeeper to a very good, MLS goalkeeper. And so it's those fine margins, and that's one thing I want all young goalkeepers to understand, is like if you can build that mentality from 14, 15, 16 years old, that mentality of like putting in that extra work, being very consistent, working on the little things that are going to, take your game to the next level. You may not see results in the first 3 months, 6 months, a year, but being consistent with it, that's what's going to get you to that next level. And it's that mentality of having that. And that's something that I feel like I struggled with in my career, was like I was very, very up and down. Like I would have a really good year, and then the next year would be not so good, and then I'd come back and have a decent year, and then a really good year, and then the next year, kind of falling off. And it's just like building that consistency is how guys get into MLS and then stay in MLS. There's plenty of guys who can get to the top level, but can they stay there? Can you have a 4-year, 5-year, 10-year career there? Then that requires a different mentality than a lot of people have, and a different level of consistency that not many people can maintain.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because another one of my partners, Andreas Weikla, he's most recently played for Toronto FC, and he's just retired. He finished up his career. He's 26 years old and he retired. And interestingly enough, he signed his first pro contract at 18 years old with IFK Norrköping in the Swedish First Division. And 6 months into his stay there, the starter got hurt, and he was 19 years old at the time. He had just turned 19, and he ended up starting the second half of the season. And he ended up nearly winning goalkeeper of the year because of his performances at 19 years old. And now he's got huge clubs calling him. He's got Atalanta who wants to sign him. He's got a whole bunch of different notable clubs. And he, gets a bad agent and it makes a few poor choices, really driven by money. And his career is essentially on the decline from there. But in terms of the level that he was at, he was starting in the first division. He's got an 81% save percentage as a 19-year-old, and his team wins the league that year. he's actually in the same news articles as Donnarumma, Andre Onana, and Albin Lafont. Like some of these really notable goalkeepers, he's in that same level too, but they've continued to maintain their level and stay at the top. And he declined since 19, and that was a really struggling point in his career. He'll always tell you the hardest part isn't necessarily getting to that level, it's staying at that level. Because now you have to, now what do you have to work for? Well, you just got to keep pushing to be better every single day, and that is tough. That's a tough part of goalkeeping.
Yeah, I think part of it, and part of it for me was like you said, he was successful and he wasn't really expecting to be getting a lot of playing time or be the starter that season. Like when I had my breakout season, I was slated to be the backup. Went into preseason, I was just really fighting to compete for that number one, but I was told, yeah, you're probably going to be the number two. Like we're looking to sign this other guy, and they brought this guy into preseason, Scottish guy, played in Scottish Premier League. He good goalkeeper. They waited until the last week of preseason to like make the decision to sign him, and so like he didn't have his paperwork, so he couldn't play the first couple of weeks. So like your moment can come at any time, even when you don't expect it. And so like I played the first 2 weeks, did really well, made very first game, made a penalty save, got a shutout, we won the game. Next week did well, we won again. And so at that point the club was just like, hey, well, maybe we don't actually really need this guy. We had another kid that had signed out of college who's now plays for Orlando City. We had a good goalkeeping group, and it's like I wasn't expecting to play that season. I was going in with the mindset of like I want to get some playing time, because the year before I was third string and I didn't play at all. And I spent that entire year training really well. Like there were times I was better than the backup. There were times I was playing better than the starter. And those are two guys that one's currently in MLS and one retired from MLS. Like I was competing with them, but I just wasn't getting the time. And so that next year, I just wanted to get some playing time, and then I ended up, being a 25 game starter, winning goalkeeper of the year, winning a championship. Like your moment comes so quickly, and so it's like having the mentality of being prepared, because you can get the phone call on a Friday night. The other goalkeeper twisted his ankle at home, and now you've got to start the next day. Like it's always you got to be, if you're going to have that professional mentality, it's got to be that mentality pretty much year round, because you always got to be ready. So that's one big thing I always want to share with goalkeepers is like, even if you're the number three, you got to train like you're going to be the number one. You're going to get playing time. You're going to get that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So I think the last thing I want to cover is like what do you see moving forward? What do you see in the next 5 years? What are the goals for you as a goalkeeper, whether it's playing, coaching, content creation, whatever it may be?
That's an interesting one. The first thing that came to my mind was, have you seen that interview with Matt Turner when he's coming out of Fairfield University and they say, "Hey, I'm Matt Turner. I want to be a some sort of financial advisor or something when I grow up," and then turns out he's at Arsenal now. And
Yeah.
so my goal for the next 5 years is I'd like to be a sports and performance mentality coach. I'm going to do a master's in counseling and psychotherapy at the University of Toronto, and so that would I'd like to set myself up that way. But first, the first goal is to be a professional goalkeeper. There's a Canadian Premier League that's just opened up about 5 years ago, and it's a new professional league, and I'd love to break out into there. I'm sure honestly, in Canada, in my opinion, the hardest part of becoming a professional is getting the opportunity to be a professional. Um, I'm sure I can be a number two at any club in the Canadian Premier League, potentially get 5, 6 games a season. I'm sure I'm at that level, but you got to continue to get your name out there and continue to train well. So that would be the goal. The other goal is to continue to have a good college career. I'm going to play at the University of Toronto, and I'd like to make an impact there and then be able to help them win some championships. And then in terms of content creation, I'd like to continue helping goalkeepers. I'd like to maybe travel around a little bit and work with goalkeepers like yourself, creators like yourself, and move potentially to the States to get a bit more of an opportunity. Yeah, in terms of content creation, in that sense, the 5 year goal would just be to make as many connections as I can, meet as many cool people as I can, and continue to help the goalkeeper community. I think it's a wonderful community to be a part of. It's something that a lot of people are quite envious of, to be fair. And so, 5 years down the road, I mean, I'd like to be able to potentially open up my own academy as well, with the right people, the right partners, to be able to allow kids who can't necessarily afford the pay to play that's in the States and Canada to be able to get better.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely have to get you down to Charlotte sometime, figure out how we can get you down here, work with some of the goalkeepers in our academy. We'll create some content. We'll figure that out sometime. But, it's been a great conversation. It's been great to get to know you a little bit and hear your background and then see where you're at and where you're going. Obviously, I wish you all the best. And however we can continue to connect and work together and continue to help the goalkeeping community, I'm always open to that. But let the listeners know where they can find you at on social media.
So I'm available on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube as Quins1GK. I know you introduced me as Quinn S1GK, and interestingly enough, that used to be the name I was trying to run with, but everyone started saying Quins1GK, so that's what it is. Quins1GK. Instagram,
Okay.
YouTube, TikTok. That's where we're going.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today. We'll definitely connect again and talk about some more goalkeeping stuff and see what else we can put out. But for now, another great episode of the Last Line Soccer podcast. So we appreciate our guests coming on and stay tuned for the next episode.